All right, I want to finish my discussion of the experience of labor during the Gilded Age. Last time we talked at the end about the Knights of Labor and how it eventually collapsed, in part because it tried to be all things to all people, was too big, too decentralized, too unwieldy. A rival organization to the KOL began in 1881. It became known as the American Federation of Labor, and this organization would last. It's still around today. It was an association of craft unions and represented only skilled workers, so it had a much more narrowed focus. And because it represented skilled workers, it had a little bit more negotiating power. Except for 1 year, from 1886 to 1924, the president of the AFL was a guy named Samuel Gompers, a giant of labor history in America. The AFL, another difference of the KOL, is the AFL did not want women to work because they believed it lowered men's wages and took jobs away from them. It wanted men to work to take money home to their wives. But, that's very sexist obviously, but for the women who did work, who had to work, it wanted equal wages for women. Another difference with the KOL, you may recall the Knights of Labor ultimately had kind of a long-term socialist vision for America, but Gompers actually supported the basic ideas of capitalism. This is another reason of the AFL's eventual success. He supported the basic ideas of capitalism. He just wanted workers to have a bigger share of profits. And curiously, he did not want government to reform labor conditions because he felt what the government gave, it could take away. Instead, he wanted labor, through its own collective bargaining and strikes, to reform working conditions. Now, leading up to a very famous or infamous labor clash, the AFL called for a general strike to achieve an 8-hour workday, one of their major goals. And on May 1st, May Day, which is, throughout modern history has sometimes been considered, Labor Day. I know that's not when we celebrate Labor Day, but it's a day to celebrate labor. On May Day, May 1st, 1886, strikes and demonstrations took place all over. And some were AFL groups, controlled groups, some were more radical. And in Chicago, which was a hotbed of radical labor activity, a strike was already occurring at the McCormick Harvester Company. It's curious because as I record this in the fall of 2012, there's a major strike going on right now in Chicago that the nation has its eyes on. Anyway, the strike was going on at the McCormick Harvester Company, and city police were harassing the strikers and had actually killed 4 strikers on April 30th, the day before. So, concurrent with the AFL's call for a general strike, radical leaders in this McCormick strike called for a protest meeting at Haymarket Square in Chicago on May 1st. And it became pretty tense pretty quickly. Police ordered the crowd to disperse, and someone threw a bomb, killing 7 policemen and injuring 67 people. I know that sounds vague, someone threw a bomb, but that's really all we know. The police opened fire and killed 4 more people. America was outraged by this kind of terror occurring in America and wanted retribution. So officials quickly rounded up 8 anarchists, professed anarchists, on the grounds that their statements had incited the bomb throwers. They arrested these 8 guys, not necessarily directly related to the Haymarket Square riot, but they said their speech was insightful to violence. 7 of these 8 were sentenced to death in one of the most injudicious trials in U.S. history. 1 committed suicide. 4 were executed. 2 had their sentence commuted to life. Middle-class America saw chaos and radicalism as a dire threat, and anarchism became a catch-all word for terrorism and violence, although most anarchists did not endorse violence, and most labor supporters were not anarchists. Union efforts were greatly impaired by unusually fair accusations of anarchism. Now we come to another major labor clash, or infamous labor clash, the Homestead Strike. Iron and steel workers, skilled iron and steel workers, were very skilled and in demand. That they were a subset of the AFL. And they had some control over their work because of their skills that employers deeply resented. Because they had that control, they could get more money, get more concessions from management. And by the mid-1880s, new technologies, however, were increasing efficiency and decreasing the need for skilled labor. In the Carnegie system, which was the dominant one, the Union only had a foothold in one of three production facilities: the Homestead plant near Pittsburgh. Homestead is a industrial suburb of Pittsburgh. By 1890, Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick decided that the Union had to go. Frick was the general manager and a partner of Carnegie. He had started his own company, the Frick Company, which had been absorbed into Carnegie's organization. So Frick was more than just an employee. He was a co-owner of the company. And so they decided it had to go by 1890. And over the next 2 years, they repeatedly cut wages, and the Union reluctantly agreed to this. In 1892, the company stopped even discussing decisions with the Union, denying them even the right of negotiation. By the way, this is Henry Clay Frick's mansion in Manhattan on the left. Ask me about that in class. All right, so at the next wage cut in 1892, the Union called for a strike, and Frick shut the plant, a lockout, closed out the workers, brought in 300 guards hired from the Pinkerton Detective Agency to allow him to hire new workers and restart the plant with non-unionized workers. The mere presence of the Pinkertons incited violence by the strikers. And as the Pinkertons approached, there was a pitched battle, a literal battle, in which 10 strikers and 3 guards were killed. And after this battle, the Pinkertons were defeated and escorted out of town. Then the Pennsylvania governor, at Frick's request, called in 8,000 National Guardsmen. We see those here, an actual photo of that on the left. And finally, so the strike continued, very tense. Finally, an attempt to kill Frick, an assassination attempt, turned public opinion against the strikers. Ask me about that assassination attempt in class. And at this point, the Union was effectively crushed. By the way, Andrew Carnegie quietly spent this time away at his castle in Scotland. The next major clash occurred at the Pullman Palace Car Company. This was the company that made and repaired luxury rail cars at a company town named Pullman near Chicago. George Pullman, the founder of this company, was a very paternalistic employer. He rented pleasant little houses to his employees. They resented the regimentation of life at the Pullman Palace Car Company, and they resented the high rents. In the winter of 1893 to 94, this is after the Panic of 1893, wages were cut 25%, although he didn't cut the rents, and they were 20 to 25% higher than nearby housing of the same quality. So the workers at the Pullman Palace Car Company went on strike, and they were aided by the militant American Railway Union, which was led by a guy named Eugene V. Debs. Debs is a very important figure in American, not just in labor history, but in American history in general. He's on a par with Samuel Gompers, and we'll be talking a lot more about him later. Debs engineered a sympathy strike that extended far beyond the Pullman Company. All union members in this American Railway Union would refuse to handle Pullman cars, and virtually every passenger train would have luxury Pullman cars in it. So we're not working those cars. So when railroads tried to fire those workers, all workers walked off the job. Very quickly, America was paralyzed. With 27 states on strike, transportation in the western U.S. ground to a halt. On the pretext that this was hampering delivery of the mail, which made it a federal affair, President Grover Cleveland and his Attorney General, Richard Olney, who incidentally was a former railroad lawyer, they had Debs arrested and used federal troops to enforce a court injunction ending the strike. The strike collapsed. Debs appealed to the Supreme Court for a writ of habeas corpus, saying you can't arrest me without a charge. And in a very very infamous decision, the court said, yeah, we're denying you that writ. Very illegal, but effectively destroyed the strike. So throughout all these famous events and the ups and downs of these various organizations, labor just doesn't seem to gain much traction in America. Why is that? The last decades, particularly of the 19th century, were very bad for labor. Some reform laws were passed, but rarely enforced. Unions do not represent very many workers. Largely, they excluded unskilled workers. They largely excluded women. They excluded African Americans and most recent immigrants. Tensions between different ethnic groups kept labor divided. Because labor was so ethnically diverse in America, that was created tensions and fault lines that managers could exploit. Also, the constant shifting in the workforce, the geographic shifting, made workers see little benefit in organizing. Labor organizing is somewhat of a long-term effort, and the workers were moving around all the time. It made it difficult. Also, American optimism, self-made man, the lotto mentality, it encouraged people to think that they would not be members of the proletariat, the working class, very long. The most important factor, however, was simply that the forces arrayed against labor were just too powerful.